Hello, greetings. My name is Deirdre Harris Kelly, and I'm one of the co-directors of the Romeo Bearden Foundation. On behalf of our co-director, Joanne Bryant Reed, and our board of directors, I welcome you. I know the world is in crisis, and we are following a lot of important stories and events. So I thank you for taking precious time to join us tonight. I hope it will be an enjoyable hour for you. Tell Your Bearden Story is a series of the Foundation's oral history project that aims to highlight and preserve the real encounters of Romeo Bearden's friends and family. These stories illuminate new perspectives and round out what scholars and researchers often miss about histories. As we engage in a Catalog Resonate project, we are ever mindful of the role archives play in understanding an artist's individual artworks. In our last program in April, collector Patrick Diamond told a thrilling history of how one small painting went all the way to the National Gallery retrospective. If you missed that episode, you can watch the recording on our website and on the Harlem One Stop YouTube. Tonight, we will hear from another collector about a special portrait and about Bearden's iconic mural at the Detroit Institute of the Arts. The conversation tonight will continue for about 45 minutes so that we can then take questions from you, the audience. The chat function has been disabled, so we can take questions in the Q&A box. And I apologize ahead of time that we may not be able to monitor all of the questions on social media from Facebook and YouTube, streaming the program also. Dear Dr. Akosua Barthwell Evans is the founder and chief executive officer of the Barthwell Group, a strategic management consulting firm in Detroit. This is a woman-owned minority business that works with a range of clients around the country, from small colleges and universities to Fortune 100 companies. The firm helps clients achieve better management outcomes through the use of customized assessments, strategic planning, trainings, and workshops. Prior to launching the firm, Dr. Barthwell Evans was an accomplished banker, lawyer, and management consultant. She was a managing director at J.P. Morgan. She became the first woman manager in the consulting practice of Coopers and Lybrand, Detroit's office, and she developed the Financial Management Institute for the CEOs of historically Black colleges and universities. Dr. Barthwell Evans is a graduate of Barnard College and Yale Law School. She also holds a PhD and an MPhil from Columbia University. Throughout her career, she has supported and provided leadership to a variety of not-for-profit organizations through her board service, including the Romeo Bearden Foundation. She's the founder and served for many years as the chairperson of the Friends of Education at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. Asmaa Walton also joins us from Detroit. She most recently was the 2019 to 2020 Romeo Bearden Graduate Museum Fellow at the St. Louis Museum. This is a fellowship program named to honor Bearden, but initiated at the museum more than 20 years ago to increase minority representation in museums. Ms. Walton was previously the inaugural Key Bank Diversity Leadership Fellow at the Toledo Museum of Art. She holds a Master's of Arts in Arts Politics from New York University and a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Art Education from Michigan State University. Asmaa is the founder of the Black Art Library, a collection of books she began curating on Black visual arts in early 2020, pandemic year to all of us. The library started as a Black History Month social media experiment where she would post the covers of anthologies and art books from Black visual culture. The project quickly attracted viewers and grew into a valuable archive an educational resource with pop-up events and a write-up in the online art magazine, Hypoallergic. So without further ado, I want to introduce Akosia Barthwell Evans and Asmaa Walton. Please join us. Hello. Welcome.
Hello.
Okay, and I will turn it over to you, Asmaa. Thank you both for joining us this evening.
Hello, Dr. Barthwell Evans. I'm really excited to be talking to you this evening.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, so I'll jump right into it. I'm really curious to know what drew you originally to Romeo Bearden's work.
Well, I think I had always been interested in art, and I had recently moved to New York City, where I had my first real job, which was at the United Nations. And I considered myself earning a lot of money, which really, in retrospect, was not. But I had decided, as opposed to just buying expensive clothes, I would invest in African-American art. And so a gallery owner from my native Detroit had suggested that I collect Romeo Bearden. I actually went to the telephone directory at the time and called up Romeo, and he, being a very humble and generous person, invited me to his loft. I told him I was interested in looking at purchasing some art. I looked at the time I was engaged, and I was looking for a piece for my ex-husband. And then Romeo said, well, what do you plan to get for yourself? And I saw a piece that I really liked, which was the New Orleans Jazz Parade. And Romeo, at the time, this was in his loft on Canal Street, he turned to his wife, Nanette, and said, Nanette, is this one of the pieces on sale? And there was a long pause, which I'm sure it was not on sale. But she did say that it was the New Orleans Jazz Parade. And that was my first piece, and that's how I got to know the Beardens.
I love that piece. And that also kind of just took us through my first question, which was, I was super interested in hearing what was your first piece. And I love to hear how you decided to, invest in Black art when you had the opportunity to probably, buy clothes or buy other things, but your mind was already thinking about art, and that's super important. So my next question takes us to the next piece of work that is in your collection that we're going to talk about, which is actually a portrait of you done by Romeo Bearden. And we'll see that slide momentarily, but I'm really interested in hearing how that actually came about.
Well, over the years, I did develop a friendship with both Romeo and Nanette. And as you may remember, Nanette actually had started a dance company in Harlem. And her objective was to provide a venue that would enable young African Americans in particular to have a place to develop as fine dancers. And the company traveled throughout the country, and it came to Detroit. So when it came to Detroit, I was very happy to help her market it, and obviously pro bono. And one day, Romeo and Nanette and I were out to breakfast, and they had just come back from St. Martin. And so after breakfast, Nanette said, oh, Akosia, here's a little something Romeo has done for you. And I said, oh, well, thank you. This is beautiful. And I looked at it and I thought it was a watercolor, like an abstract watercolor of a landscape. And to my chagrin, then Romeo took the piece and turned it the other way. He said, it goes like this. It's a portrait of you. And so that is how I got the portrait. It was something given to me as a gift because of Nanette's gratitude for my helping with her dance company.
I love that story. And it's such a beautiful portrait.
Thank you.
And we're also going to talk about one more piece, which is actually behind you, correct?
Yes, it is behind me as well. Mhm.
Okay, so we also do have a slide of that image so people can see it a little closer, but could you tell everyone about that piece and how it made its way to your collection?
Sure. So one of the things I didn't mention is that actually Romy and Nanette were guests in my home. And also they came with June Kelly, who was the manager of Romeo Bearden for many years. And it was because of June, who was my mentor in many ways, that I was exposed to a lot of the work of Romeo Bearden. At the time, Romeo was very concerned that there were not as many African Americans as he would have liked collecting his work. So with the help of June, they sponsored a series of parties and things like that, where they would have small collages available. And then we also hosted an event for Romero in Detroit, where a number of our friends purchased small collages. But it was through this long-term relationship with June that I was exposed to many of Bearden's works. And so this was one that I happened to buy as well. And I think I liked it because it was just different from some of the other pieces that I had seen and that I was aware of.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's a black and white piece. So that alone, you're used to seeing a lot of color. But I do
Yeah,
love.
and it's one of his earlier pieces. It was done
So
in 47.
Yeah, it's nice. I really love like the line work of this one. So kind of you talked a little bit about how Romeo Bearden was, he wanted more African Americans to be collecting his work. And that just kind of makes me think about just his legacy and the impact that he had in the art world. So I do have one question, and it's, when you hear the term Bearden's legacy, what thoughts or, what ideas kind of come across your mind?
So a lot of ideas come across my mind because, first of all, I think Bearden, like many people who are great, had a certain sense of humility and also a certain sense of giving back. So I think one lesson that I learned from him was the importance of following your passions and your dreams, because like a lot of probably middle-class African Americans at the time, the career paths that were supposed to lead to success, one of them was become a physician. And so his parents wanted him to become a physician, and he instead followed his passion and became an artist. So the first thing about a legacy that resonates with me is to follow your passion. But another thing that I learned from him in conversation was what he really wanted to do was to ensure that his art would resonate with everyone, regardless of race. And he kind of wanted, I think, to make certain that everyday acts of life, that being a gifted artist, he could transform that into something that would actually have meaning to other people, and that they could see the beauty in some simple act, someone stepping into a garden or someone bathing. And so that resonates with me when I think of his legacy. But I think another important aspect of his legacy was he always believed in giving back, and he was always thoughtful about how could he create a path for other artists. And he was very much aware of the difficulties that often African American artists particularly have to endure. And so part of his legacy is the very foundation that's hosting this event. The fact that he left a number of his works so that he could endow this foundation. He also, as you know, created a space, which was a welcoming space for African-American artists for many years. So I think he wanted to not only create beauty and to glorify many African Americans who were ordinary people, but show kind of that beauty in our lives, but also to create a pathway so that other young artists who often struggle and who often do not have an easy route to kind of maintain, their sustainability of their dreams. I think he wanted to help them. So that always resonates with me as well.
Thank you for sharing that. It's really nice to be able to hear that perspective from someone who knew him. So another exciting thing is that we're both actually in Detroit, even though we're doing this virtually right now. So I'm really excited to talk about this next piece, which we'll see shortly in the next slide. But it is a mural that was installed at the Detroit Institute of Art, and I would love for you to share kind of your experiences and what role you kind of played into bringing this to the DIA.
Yes, well, I've been active in many art museums. As you mentioned, I'm the founder of the Friends of Modern Art at MoMA, but I was also active at the Detroit Institute of Arts. So I actually served on the board of something called the Founders Junior Council, which was sort of like the training ground for future trustees. And the Institute was celebrating a milestone in its history. And this was around 1987. And so the deputy director that I was close to at the time, Michael Kahn, was talking about why not celebrate the work of a Michigan artist. And I proposed, why not celebrate Romeo Bearden? And another friend of mine who was on that board, Ann Greenstone, who was a significant donor, she hadn't really heard of Bearden, but I brought in, a catalog, and she immediately supported the idea. And so we were able to convince the deputy director and others that it would be a good idea to honor Romeo Bearden and his work. And what he had in mind with this piece, which is called Quilting Time, is when you come to Detroit Institute of Arts, one of the most famous aspects of our Institute of Arts is the murals, which were created by Diego Rivera, and which kind of celebrate the automobile industry and manufacturing. So Bearden wanted to kind of complement the very male, the very industrial murals. So the Quilting Time, as you can see, it celebrates in some ways African-American women. It's rural and it's very traditional. And so it was kind of a juxtaposition to those industrial murals of Diego Rivera. But although, of course, Bearden came to Detroit, the tiles were from Italy. And I believe that he never actually got to see the unveiling in Detroit because at the time, he was ill at the time. But it's a beautiful piece, and I'm very proud that we have it in Detroit.
I love it. I think I've only seen it as much as I've been to the DIA, but actually stopped and take a look at it for a long period of time, one time. So I'm really excited to go back because they have a lot of really great shows that I want to go see soon. So
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to take some more time to look at it.
And I think you see a lot of the images that you see in a lot of Bearden's work, like the music. That was something he always cherished. And that goes back to the first piece that I acquired, New Orleans Jazz Parade. And the reason I was attracted to that was the music. I love jazz. I have a lot of relatives in New Orleans. And it's a colorful, happy piece. But I think, as we all know, like Bearden always was very fond of jazz and music.
And I also wanted to share something that I recently acquired I actually got it a few days ago, but I got it for the Black Art Library. And it is Romero Bearden's Origins and Progressions catalog. And this was produced by the Detroit Institute of Art in 1986. And of course, you can see that it has quilting time on the front. I also think it has a nice image of it inside as well. But I was really excited to be able to acquire this, and I was hoping that it would come before we had this talk.
Mm-hmm.
On the page.
Yeah.
There's a little glare from my light, but it's really wonderful to be able to see this and to know that this is from the year that it actually became a part of the DIA. Okay, so that actually was my last question. If we wanted to begin fielding questions from the Q&A, and if you haven't had time to write any questions in the Q&A, feel free to do so now.
And I think one of the things you mentioned before that goes back to something that was important to Bearden and that's still very important today is encouraging more of us to be collectors. Because I think sometimes the act of collecting may be sort of mystified. It may be that people feel like that's only something for the very wealthy. But one of the things June helped me with is kind of looking at how could you buy things. You didn't have to pay for them all at once. How could you be guided by what really appeals to you? Because I think that's very important. Like, art is an investment, but I think everything I've purchased, it's just been something that was really meaningful to me and something that still brings me pleasure every day when I look at these pieces. And so I think that that's something that I hope others will consider, like purchasing the art, supporting artists. Many times, as we've mentioned, their road to success may be a bumpy one, and they may not get the recognition they deserve, particularly when we see the millions of dollars that other art might attract, but often some very deserving African-American artists find it much more difficult to actually have financial sustainability.
I think that that's so important that you brought that up as well, because one, collecting is kind of intimidating. When you think about collecting, you assume that, oh, I need to have, X amount of dollars before I can be able to collect anything. And that's not always the case. I think last year I decided, I was like, I want start buying some prints. So I'm buying prints from artists that are working right now. And those are the ones that are really important to support because they're the ones making their living off of their work. So I love being able to do that. And it's encouraging to the artists, and it makes me happy to be able to continue to do that and to continue to support artists in general.
Yeah, and I've had the experience of getting to know a number of artists through my work at the Friends of Education at MoMA. And, I've had the pleasure of seeing some artists really come into their own after many, many years of just being true to their art and not having the recognition or success they deserve. So I think it's something that we should all be cognizant of and be supportive of. And that's obviously the importance of the Romeo Bearden Foundation as well, because when I practiced law on Wall Street, one of the events I helped to host was I took some of the summer associates to June's gallery, and one of the partners came who was a large collector, and he was so astounded that he was a major collector of modern art, American art, and he had never heard of Romeo Bearden, and he was just, how could I have missed him? So I think it's something, people like June have played a very important role in helping a number of artists get the recognition they deserve, including Romeo Bearden.
Okay, it looks like we might have a few questions.
Asmaa?
Yes.
We do have a couple of questions that I can round out for you.
Great.
Yeah. One question for Akosua was about Bearden's personality. So, given that this is for the record, what would you say, how would you characterize the artist's personality when you met him, when you knew him?
Well, I mean, obviously, I would have to say somewhat humble, because I remember when I went to his loft on Canal Street, first, he was very gracious to me personally. He really didn't know me. And he was, I remember one remark he made, there were cats all over the loft. And some were on a table where some of the pieces he was working on were there. And he said, oh, these cats, they appreciate the value of all this stuff. He was very, very humble, self-effacing, but a strong person in terms of his convictions and what he believed in. So he was someone that I enjoyed getting to know, and as well as Nanette.
Another question is, what other types of art or artists do you collect, and do you have a collecting style?
Do I have a collecting what?
Style.
Oh. So all of the works in my personal collection are by African-American artists. And so I'm proud to have Al Lovings, Howardina Pendell. I have a piece I love of hers that's something I see every day. It's in my front hall. It's a large piece, and she's one of the persons I've gotten to know and consider a friend. And so the piece I have is sort of autobiographical because it shows her travels to Asia, but it also has images in there that reflect an accident she was in. I have, as I said, Al Loving. I have other Beardens that we aren't discussing tonight. And I think the other thing I have an artist that some may have heard of, and you may have heard of him, particularly from, if you're from Detroit or Atlanta, Carl Owens. So actually, I believe the first portrait he did for sale was a portrait my parents commissioned of me when I was in grade school. He was my elementary art teacher and then went on to become a fairly established artist. I have some tanners. So it's really just pieces I enjoy. My father, I have a portrait of my father done by Huey Lee Smith, which I only found out kind of later in life who had done this portrait. So I guess it's an eclectic collection, but it's focused around African American art. And the criterion I use for collecting is, what do I really like? What do I relate to? And what do I enjoy?
That's great. A couple of other questions about Bearden. One is, what were the considerations maybe on the committee for what the topic of the mural would be? And then I'll combine it with another question of, how did you recover when Bearden told you you were looking at your portrait upside down?
I mean, I think Bearden, as I said, to me was very generous and a very gracious person. And so, I mean, obviously I was very embarrassed, but he wasn't really trying to embarrass me. I think he was just like, you're looking at this the wrong way. And, you know, I apologized, but he didn't really, you know, he didn't berate me, or he didn't seem to be offended. And he was gracious. I think he was always, in my encounters with him, a very gracious person. And, you know, and so was Nanette, because I mean, I think on a number of occasions I've tried to help people, but I remember sitting in the audience when that dance company was performing in Detroit, and I was so amazed that she recognized me during the program, because a lot of times, you know, you do things, you're not really looking for recognition and you usually don't get it, but she made that point of recognizing me publicly. So I think they were both very gracious, generous people.
Okay, Asmaa, you can't see the question, so I'll feed you another one.
I didn't answer your other question. So really, as far as I know, I don't remember every detail about quilting time, but I believe, you know, the director and other members of the council, they really let the artist, as it should be, determine what exactly he wanted to create. And it was very well received. It is a very beautiful piece.
Mm-hmm. One question comes from Carol Hall, which I think I know.
Carol. Hi, Carol.
She says, hello, Akosia. Can you please speak more about Bearden at MoMA and the innovation and progress of MoMA Friends of Education, its impact and legacy? Thank you, Carol.
Okay, well, thank you, Carol. So let's see. So how the Friends of Education came about was Isabel Stewart had invited me to, I think it was a luncheon hosted by David Rockefeller Jr. And he raised the question that MoMA wanted to engage more African Americans, and what could they do to do so? And I think I was inspired. You know, Detroit has a long history of African Americans being involved in the Detroit Institute of Arts. So I was kind of inspired by that. And I thought about it, and I had lunch, I think, with Agnes Gund. And I proposed the idea of having this Friends of Education. And she was like, well, who would the members be? And, you know, I had done my homework. So I had a list, I think, of about 60 people, all of whom were pretty well known in Detroit in the African-American community and who collected art. And so I'll never forget, at the first meeting, we had someone who became a good friend as well, George Ween. I didn't really know him, and he had been invited by June. June was very instrumental in helping me organize this Friends of Education. And Al Loving was very instrumental in taking me around New York and introducing me to artists, including Howardina Pendell. And so George thought that this was some kind of sham or something. And he was like, who is she? Who is she? And he, you know, he questioned, rightly so, well, was MoMA really committed to supporting African-American art? If they were, why weren't there more of them? And so one of my friends from Detroit, Ed Swan, spoke up and said, well, you know, these are issues we can all address. It doesn't mean we have to dismantle what we're doing. And so from that, and I went over after the meeting, shook George's hands and said, you know, would love to get to know you and to hear your suggestions. And I think the Friends of Education, you know, it's still going on, but it was very interesting because, you know, the people who were the original members we were all dedicated to making sure that African-American art would have more recognition at the Museum of Modern Art. Our first event was with Roy de Carava. And, you know, I think it was very meaningful because at the time, a lot of the artists really appreciated the opportunity to have that recognition by a museum like MoMA. So a lot of friendships were made. We did change the museum in a lot of ways because not only through the Friends of Education, but then other members that they met were then invited to serve on other committees, et cetera. So I think we did have a profound effect on the Museum of Modern Art, and it's still going on.
So we have a few more questions. So the next question is, do you think the value of Bearden's work is on par with other artists of his stature? You know, artists of color, white artists. And I'm thinking that this question means monetary value, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, I can put it this way. So the work has certainly appreciated in value. And I'm not an art connoisseur, but I can tell you that through my work at MoMA, you know, I have often had the opportunity to go on tours and lectures. And I don't know the exact value of all of Bearden's works. Obviously, they have appreciated a lot. I know that my collection has appreciated a lot. But there are other artists that are revered in the American art world, commanding millions of dollars. And again, I'm not an authority on art. I do know of some artists who have commanded very high prices for their work, I believe like Martin Poirier. But the answer is no. I don't think that the work is valued in terms of monetary value in the same way that the work of either their counterparts who are not African American in terms of how that work is valued. And I think that's something else that I would point out about you and Kelly, because she worked very hard to try to cause a greater appreciation of the art and to demand the prices that it should demand.
True. Our next question is from Camara Holloway. Can you say more about the gallery in Detroit that sold Bearden and the community of Bearden collectors there?
The gallery is no longer in existence, unfortunately. So, and as far as the Bearden collectors, the collectors I'm referring to were persons invited to a luncheon that we hosted. Most of them had no knowledge of Bearden originally. However, there were outlets in Detroit because there used to be galleries like in our major department store where there were some Bearden works available. And there are certainly a number of persons in Detroit who collect art and have great collections. I don't know if they necessarily focus on Bearden, but there are a number of collectors.
Okay, so our next question is from Marilyn Nance. How important is it for collectors to build relationships with artists? And do you prefer acquiring art directly from the artist or through a gallery?
So with the exception of working with June, I think almost all my art has come from the artists. And I think it's so important to have the relationships with the artists because you appreciate more what they're trying to express, and they're generous in kind of explaining to you what the art means. So, I'm very fortunate, again, Howardina Pendel, getting to know her, going to that wonderful exhibit she had in Chicago. Al took me around to meet a lot of artists, and he always explained Roy de Carava. Just, I'll always remember how excited he was when at our first event, and then we did push the Friends of Education, I think, to honor him. And I remember his name was on a marquee or something, and he was so, he was so thrilled. I mean, I just think that many of these artists, and Bearden was of the same ilk, they're brilliant. So they're not just people creating art, but usually they are intellectuals in the true sense. They study, they read a lot, they're very knowledgeable, and they have, the ones I've met, all have a sense of wanting social justice, wanting a better world for us. So this has been a very educational experience for me and something I treasure to get to know the artists. And, a lot of this was not planned, but I think that's how I've collected and why it meant so much to me.
Okay, let's see if we have any more questions.
So we have two questions that are kind of in the same kind of ballpark, but were there any artists that Bearden kind of talked about that he regarded highly, that might have been his peers or that he collected himself?
My impression of Bearden, and I want to put things in context. We were friends. I certainly wasn't his closest friend or anything like that. But I think it speaks for the fact that he endowed the foundation. And I think it was very important for him to try to do whatever he could to make sure that other artists would have an opportunity. And I mean, just from reading, I know that he was friendly with other artists. I don't know the extent of those relationships.
So that looks like we might have one more question. Okay. Oh, this looks like this might be. Let's see.
Asmaa, I can probably try to help you out. I don't know if you can see them all.
Yes, I was trying to go between the chat and the question.
I see two questions. I know you're trying to combine them, but one was, you mentioned that you buy what you like. Are there other criteria one should use when making art selections? And then also a separate question is, can you give advice on how to start collecting on a small budget?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've never bought a piece simply for investment value, but I did learn early on that there may be art that you just like and it's not going to appreciate, and there can be art when you purchase art from artists that are in galleries or museums, obviously that is going to have a greater financial value over the long term. But I think part of it is having an eye, and I don't pretend to have that eye necessarily, but buying things that kind of resonate with you, speak to you, and then getting to know the artist. And you know, there are a lot of stories like E.T. Williams, who is another sort of mentor to me. He's spent so much of his life, he's the former chair of the Romeo Bearden Foundation. And he also was very close to Romero Bearden. But, you know, he's spent a lot of his life encouraging artists. Like right now, we have some works by an artist, Claude Lawrence, that E.T. Williams kind of, I would say, single-handedly has raised his profile, given gifts of his works to museums, which helps to appreciate the value. So artists and museums actually obviously are going to be of greater value, and sometimes you can meet them and they will give you a break on the work. But, you know, when I was at MoMA, one of the things at the time, Al Loving was not in MoMA. And we tried to get the museum to purchase some of his work. And that failed, but now he is. So I think you buy what you like, what resonates with you. If you're doing it as an investment, if an artist is in a museum, there's going to be a greater chance that work will appreciate more rapidly. So I don't know how much more time, but before we conclude, I just want to say a special thanks. I am a trustee at the Romeo Bearden Foundation, but I just want to say a special thanks to Deirdre and Joanne, the co-directors, as well as the family members that I've had the privilege to get to know. E.T. Williams, who helped with so much. Because I think this foundation deserves the support of everyone. And the co-directors are so dedicated in making sure that the legacy of Romeo Bearden is preserved and is enhanced as it must be. It deserves to be. So I just want to say, in whatever my last remarks might be, that I really appreciate the dedication and work of you, Deirdre, you, Joanne, all your family members, in making sure that this great artist, that his legacy is preserved and that more people get to understand his greatness. I just wanted to say that.
Well, I will just say that I'm honored. Thank you so much for those words, because so often when we're working hard, it does seem like it's a, hard row for a nonprofit. We are an organization that was never built on a big endowment. And so we've always, been fundraising for all of the programs we do so that we can offer these programs for free. And so that is what we do. And of course, if you'd like to be a part of what we do and you want to know more about what we do, you can go to our website, www.beardenfoundation.org, and find out more information. And you can also continue to follow us on Facebook, where we publicize a lot of programs like this. And if you want more programs like this, feel free to donate freely. I know there's a lot of organizations asking for money, and there's a lot of causes out there. But as you can see from this presentation tonight, we are working steadily on quality programming that supports all of the work that we do for the catalog Resonate, which is one of the ultimate projects that we are working on. And, I feel like the archives that we're creating through these oral histories will be a crucial part of that digital catalog that we're working on with our partner, the Wildenstein-Plattner Institute. So again, you can go to our website and learn more from that. And I did want to say that a couple of people thanked us for the programming. I think we have some regular followers following us. And one person said, thank you for continuing to have these educational sessions. And they are very helpful. If one is not connected like yourself, this is a question for the speaker, how do you gain access to the available pieces from great African-American artists, as well as the historic catalogs? Where do you begin? What sites do you follow? And so I just want to answer that a little bit by saying, you can follow some of the galleries that represent Bearden, and one that represents the foundation and the estate is DC Moore Gallery here in New York. They have a wonderful website that really highlights all of the exhibitions that they're putting together on Bearden. And so that's one place to start. You can check out Asmaa's Instagram if you want to see some of the historic catalogs that she has curated. And I don't know if we want to say a few words, Asmaa, but before you do, I just want to thank Dr. Barthwell Evans for joining us and for your kind words and all of your service over the years on our board and for all of the art organizations that you support.
Thank you. I just want to I do just want to say 30 seconds. Please don't forget about the June Kelly Gallery as well.
Absolutely.
She was June one of the first to be in the Association of American Art Dealers, and she's helped so many artists. So I just have to put in that plug as well.
Absolutely, and June was a great supporter, and she worked with Bearden for over 13 years on special projects. If any of you out there know of the Ma Chan's cookbook, that's like one of my favorite things, and the Jamming at the Savoy print. She's a publisher of that. And so yes, June is a great friend, and she has focused her gallery on contemporary living artists, although she does carry some Elizabeth Catlett and Bearden's, but her exhibitions are focused on contemporary living artist of color, and she does a tremendous amount of work still in Soho. And so we definitely cheer her. Thank you, Akosia, for that. All right, Asmaa, can you tell us a little bit about your project?
Yes, well, just if you're interested in knowing more about the Black Art Library or seeing what books I'm collecting, you can follow Black Art Library on Instagram. If you're not on Instagram, you also can just Google the Black Art Library and a few articles will come up and you'll be able to read a little bit more and know a little bit more about my project. And it is also, an exhibition is opening with the Black Art Library on Friday at Cleveland, in Cleveland at Spaces Gallery. So if you're in Cleveland, you can check that out. Thank you, Dr. Barthwell Evans, for answering my questions and taking some time to share some really important information.
And thank you. It's a pleasure meeting you, and I hope that we meet in person sometime.
I do too. We have to. We're in the same city.
Yes, we all have to hope to meet each other at some point.
Sometime.
I also want to thank Nadal Canary and the folks over at the Harlem One Stop for producing us this evening and being our partners, and the cultural collaborative here in Harlem that we're a part of. You know, it takes a village. So we want to thank everyone for joining us this evening too. You've been a wonderful audience and lots of great questions. Thank you.
Thank you.